Welcome to the Obojima Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and I am with Ari and Adam, and we are the writers of Obojima, the book about nothing, the book about everything. And you're tuning into our weekly writers meeting where we sit down and we have a chat about a random topic. And if you watched the last episode, then you know that we dipped our toes into what we thought was going to be a single episode, and that is the sword schools. Last week we talked about one of the 4 sword schools, and now we're going to try to get the rest of the 3 done in a single episode. Let's see what we can do. Weehaw indeed.
There
okay,
we go.
So if you haven't watched the first episode, go back and watch the other one. It just happened. And we talk about the basis of sword schools, which are, there's 4 of them, and they each have 2 masters, and you have to go and compete to or earn your way in. And then once competing with the masters and proving that you're a master, you get like a feat and all that. So I do a way better job in the last one. Go there, watch that one. This episode, we are going to pick up past Caden and Moon and jump onto one of the other sword schools. And I'm thinking, because we were talking about them a lot, let's just jump into Toroff and Boulder. Let's just jump into the brutally brutal ones.
Get into the Bracken wetlands.
So let's
what delicious feet
the feet
can you learn from them?
The feet they have, the tasty feats. Don't take that out of context.
Or you could say taste defeats.
Taste defeats. There it is.
You will no longer taste defeats if you get this feat.
So very, 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 very in line with what you're saying. These rough and tumble masters, they have these called shot feats. So it gives you a total of 3 strikes that you can utilize. There is a head strike, a torso strike, and a leg strike. Oof. And similar to the feats Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter, you can take a penalty to your attack to gain a benefit. So head strike, before you make a melee attack with a weapon that you are proficient with, you can choose to take a -5 penalty to the attack roll. If the attack hit, the target has disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the end of its turn. So you are concussing them. Torso strike, before you make an attack with a melee weapon or with a weapon that you are proficient with, you can choose to take a -5 penalty to the attack roll. If the attack hits, the target can't speak until the start of the next turn. This was like our little our forced silence, essentially, like a way to kind of take away spell casting from a spellcaster. I thought it was a interesting way to kind of combat some of those spells. And it's pretty cool. And then finally, leg strike, before you make a melee attack, the weapon, all the same stuff. If the attack hits, the target's speed is reduced by 10 feet to a minimum of 10 feet. This effect lasts until the start of your next turn. So striking the leg to reduce their movement. Yeah, it is a brutal, very combat oriented, weakening your opponent, like hitting them attack by attack, draining them from their natural ability to combat you and fight you. And so they're none of these things are extra damage, but they are all, make it harder for your opponent to fight you back in some capacity. You could utilize so it's very brutalistic in a sense. And I think that makes sense for the people in the Blackwater wetlands who are all going and fighting howlers or big packs. This also kind of leads into our conversation off camera about like someone who wanted to fight a bunch of people all at once.
Yeah.
Having this would be really, really useful. Like hitting a bunch of people and kind of taking away from, like, even attacking 2 people and keeping your distance, moving out of their reach, now that you have further distance than them,
So it's like a Batman wiping out a bunch of robbers, and like they're not able to run away and escape. So he's like kicking out their legs and they're falling over, and then he's concussing other people.
Yeah, it is exactly that. So this is a very different fighting style. This is a very different feat from the last one. And so with Toroff and Boulder, my
Toroff
dyslexia
and
just
Boulder.
gets
Yeah.
me going on these ones. I cannot say their names right. They're in the Blackwater Wetlands, and we already kind of described a little bit of what we were talking about, what we were thinking, kind of this like, commune, like singular house living style in the middle of the, this kind of dangerous area of the island. They don't take payments. They're not near a like a village or anything.
No.
They're probably singular, like isolated to themselves within the space. They're very self-sufficient. They hunt and probably grow crops in some capacity in their area. They fend for themselves, and they exist within this space by themselves. And people that train, it's probably a lot harder to get a coin or a token that allows you access there. They might even belittle you if you trained at the other schools or if you're below a certain level.
Yeah.
I certainly think that while Caden and Moon would accept a young student, like a 12-year-old kid who's excited to learn the sword, might accept them into the ranks and like, teach them, cautiously and like you'd teach a child something. I think if you are a 12-year-old at this place, you are a menace to society. You're a dangerous 12-year-old. That is for sure. I think anyone here has to be 3rd level or higher, which doesn't sound really high, but for Obojima's standards, it's not like, there's not 20th level characters walking around. I think a 3rd level character, someone who has if you're a fighter, has access to their subclass in some capacity. They are already trained and proficient in certain skills.
Do you think the idea with the sword schools, kind of broadly speaking, that there is kind of a progression? Like if you were going to go like from easy to hard, is that something that is intentional, or is like you could kind of go to any of them, and that Toroff and Boulder are an exception? Like they are like, okay, if you want to really get serious about this, because I think you're learning real skills from all of them. It's not like the other ones are phony masters, but like I think Toroff and Boulder just kind of look down their noses at people.
Yeah, I don't think Toroff and Boulder is perhaps harder to gain admission to, but maybe you might have to do a little more proving, or you might have to, for example, if you showed up with a token and said, "Oh, I trained with a master," I could imagine Boulder coming out and being like, "Which master? Under Kanan and Moon's teaching, I'm sure. My weakest student can defeat one of them. If you want to join the school, go bring me back, tie up a rampaging, beast or something like that. Go and incapacitate some crazy beast in the woods. Don't kill it and drag it back here. And if you show it to me alive, I might let you train at the school or something like that."
Yeah, it's interesting because like Ken and Mamoon, as they stand now, the feat is actually doing damage, right? They're doing quite a bit of damage. And these seem to be more incapacitating. So is there some kind of like, I don't know, there's some way that they think about combat, whereas if you incapacitate your opponent, it's more sort of
then you can
honorable.
ridicule them.
Yeah. Then you can like, put them on display and just be like, haha, because it seems like their style is about incapacitating and knocking them out.
I mean, we could also consider, you could swap them.
Yeah.
Right. If it makes more sense about one is,
Well, I don't know that it's not necessarily like, I think, Kanan and Moon's is Toroff and Boulder's as currently sits, even though it's incapacitating, it still feels more brutal. Like, Kanan and Moon's is like you defend yourself and you get to strike first. It feels swift and elegant though, right? Compared to like Kanan and Moon's feels like I'm concussing you. I'm knocking the wind out of you. I'm like hitting your, like, it feels in the same way, like when you watch an MMA fight, oh God, stop hitting him. Both take a break.
Leave the poor guy alone.
Okay, so it still does damage. Like it's just not doing extra damage.
It's just not doing extra damage. So each of your strikes is still hurting them. You are just gaining an additional bonus that like also has this other effect that's pretty, rough.
Yeah, that has to do with like, knocking somebody's bell, ringing their bell, or knocking the wind out of them, or like, Muay Thai leg kicking them until they collapse.
Yeah.
That feels more brutal.
And these are sword schools. They're using weapons. So like, what does that mean? Like, are they like cutting a tendon? Like what?
Yeah.
What is?
I mean, I think that gets into like sort of the limitation of D&D, where it's like, I can hit you in the leg with a sword until you get down to 1 hit point,
right?
And then you can still run away. But this is actually starting to flavor it, where now we're saying you're not able to kind of run that fast.
You've actually taken a wound.
You're actually taking wounds, which I think
Now that makes it brutal.
Yeah,
because if it was without weapons, and it's like, okay, it's a Muay Thai kick to the leg, and it's like, and that's really brutal, but it's not. I mean, it could be a lasting injury. If I got kicked in the leg, I'd be a heap on the ground. But like,
we're gonna test that after this episode.
But it's swords. Now we're talking about like you're drawing blood. This isn't. The whole idea of being hit in the head to silence somebody. What's the movie in your head there? Is that like? Yeah, it's just.
Well, I mean, and also is the like when you get hit in the guts or whatever, you're not able to like speak. You're like, oh, you're trying to cast your spell. But when you get hit in the leg, is it stackable? Like, every time I leg kick you, you're losing X, number of.
So
until the point where you actually couldn't move.
So it is stackable, but there is a minimum, so you can never go below 10. So no matter what, you'll always be able to hobble, but it is stackable.
Why?
Because it felt a bit much to fully demobilize someone completely. But that being said, based off of what we're saying here, you're like, these are brutal. Why are you doing this to someone? But it sounds like sword techniques that were created while combating big monstrous things in the middle of the woods. Like, they don't, they practice on each other, but like maybe most of their practice is just like, oh yeah, the howler is way faster than me. So I attack its legs to slow it down. I'm doing these things because this is what you do when you're out in the woods trying to protect yourself against a big pack of monsters that are fighting you. You do these things to get them onto your level.
That just gave me a thought. So if they're hunting these big things, even though they're really tough and like you have to prove yourself, what they would appreciate though, I would imagine, is
a cuddle.
That too. Everyone wants a good hug.
Snuggle.
But like the kind of like the pack tactics, right? Like if you're going to go hunt this thing, you'd be an idiot to do it by yourself, right? There almost might be a thing where it's like, okay, we're going to, if you're going out and hunting and you have this master that does this technique, then you have other people there that will take advantage of it. You know what I mean? Like, so that we can play with a school that their philosophy is about fighting in tandem.
I think the issue is building a feat around that mechanically means that you need to have a secondary fighter in your party.
But that's already, the feat's already done that, right? If I'm incapacitating or if I'm winding somebody or making it, they can't do it. By virtue of the fact that I am already fighting with other people, like they're taking advantage of it. That's the thing. Like when I reduce somebody's movement, it's probably somebody else in the party who's going to be the one to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So you're just kind of like running through things, whacking them, and then the people behind you are going to clean it up, kind of deal. Yeah. Another thing that I think would be cool with this, because Toroff and Boulder are in the Bracken Wetlands, they are fighting monsters. I think when we go to develop some more monsters, we should develop monsters that have things that these feats actually defeat, like a monster that sings to you and lures you in, or a monster that is casting some kind of just singular spell by speaking. And that way the winding thing, they've developed that to fight these monsters.
That's cool.
Or a thing with multiple legs and it skitters around and it runs, and that's why they've developed that skill, or like, something like that.
If you, in their school, then one of the things that you could do is like, before you can challenge a master here, you have to like defeat each one of these creatures with each one of these attacks.
That's cool.
So it's like you learn these attacks by fighting these monsters, and then once you feel like you've learned them, come and practice them on the touch the master.
See if you can do it. That's great.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh man, what would happen if you touched the master, but you'd already learned the Kanan and Moon's Master Strike, and you use that to defeat the Master. Oh my
I just want to
god!
clarify, touching the Master is not a euphemism. This is part of a duel. This is a first to touch with practice swords.
Watch the first podcast episode.
Don't touch the Master in public, please.
Hold on. Cut.
Rewind.
Don't include any of that. No, if you were to use that technique, to use that technique to defeat Boulder in Toroff and Boulder school, like, what would that do to the school? They'd all be like,
man.
"Oh my god, you were beat using another master's technique."
Yeah.
That would crush them.
They
might even be like, "We're not teaching you the feat.
Yeah.
Get out of here."
And by the time you get there,
never come back.
There's a good chance that you probably will know one of the other schools' feats.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah. That is a choice you have to make in the moment because
Yeah. So that is interesting then. So part of that comes, it sounds like we are painting and we're all on the same page, that Toroff and Boulder are both pretty, like, I don't know if they're both meatheads, but they're both like, really fixated on a specific thing, right? Like, they're maybe harsh to outsiders. They think they're the best, right? They have unique styles of living, and that feels abnormal. It also seems like, someone who might come here might be like, to what end are you doing this? Like, it makes sense. Kanan and Moon train students and they defend and they're like helping people. Like, they're an organization that makes sense. They practice this. There's an art of combat. They are teaching the next generation of sword fighters who go on to be adventurers or witches or, carrier brigade. Like, these are the next generation. This feels like a weird club in the middle of the woods.
I mean, their answer might be they get to do the things they do because we're doing things we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. It's the whole, like, it's the Gondor. But we're keeping all of your land safe. Kind of thing. Right. That's kind of,
we're on the front line.
We're on the front line. We're dealing with all this stuff. And you might
have
that might be the difference between, Toroff and Boulder as well. One might be like, I'm doing this to prove myself every day. Right. It's that. And you might have the other person saying, I'm doing this because if we don't do this, the monsters that are in the Breckwater wetlands will potentially, continue out into the Gale Fields, or like this is an important thing that we're doing. And there's a reason the school has existed for, centuries, right? They're taking on that tradition.
This is going to paint the Rangers in a certain way, but how many of the Rangers were taught at the school?
That might be like, where do they go? Like to learn how to fight with swords. That might be part of that tradition. That's really cool. And then, which means Toroff and Boulder would have opinions about, about the corruption, about what's going on with or what happened with the Rangers.
Yeah.
One of them might have been a Ranger, and they just weren't there at that time. But that's what they did maybe when they were younger and all this kind of stuff. So there's something that's really cool there. And the fact that they're hunters, would be great if one of them or both of them were Rangers at some point.
There's also, nothing saying that they have to be fighters. They could both be Rangers.
It's just about using swords.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It would also be interesting, maybe, like, if you, either on your journey as you're trying to get your master certification or whatever, when you whatever
your
it
MMA.
is. Your MMA. I'm like, on the long journey to get your master cert, your first degree black belt. But when you get that, like, each maybe you gain a point of permanent strength. Like, if you go through the Toroff and Boulder program, you're changed. You become stronger
if you drink muscle milk once a week.
If you take your stuff, like, if you eat your vitamins, like, you gain like a point of permanent strength. If you go through the Kanan and Moon, you might get a point of dex or intelligence because you're learning something there. It's like an extra little thing.
I think mechanically we don't want that forward facing to the players, because then it's going to be gamified. But I think as a DM, that is certainly like the step above, right? Where it's like, you've learned the feat, but now like true mastery comes with the addition of something else.
Yeah.
Where like you take the thing. It also could be that like, you know, to mention what we said earlier, Toroff is dead. Boulder has requested you to come and take their place. If you choose to take this place, you get a +2 strength. You gain this permanent benefit. Like you are, whatever it is or something like that. Like you are taking this title, and there's something that comes with that. It is a little weird because it kind of takes away, kind of does the reverse of what we were trying to do with the sword schools in general, which is like showing a level of like growth before you get a feat to just automatically get something at the end. But like
that's all discretionary, right? We're not going to mechanize that part of it. I like the idea of looking at Toroff and Boulder as well. Like I could imagine one of them, if we want to make one of them more ranger focused, that they don't actually live at the school. So they live out in the wilderness. They're kind of like, out in, in the bush constantly. And like, maybe like, there are a few students that, will kind of learn to live out there. And then Boulder is the one who lives at the school or whatever. And it's all about like, doing leg day and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Doing a lot of like, doing pull-ups on the tree limbs. And
to keep this going, we're going to have to jump away from Toroff and Boulder soon. I know.
Alas.
I know. I'm sorry. But I honestly feel like we have a pretty strong understanding of what Toroff and Boulder look like, feel like who these characters are in comparison to, like
Candid
and Moon. Like we have a lot of going on for them. We understand their like minimalistic style, this kind of like living off the land. Like it's a very unique experience out there, but they're very close to Polwater, who is dealing with corruption.
Yeah.
So, do they have any specific thoughts? Like they obviously have thoughts on the Rangers, but they probably have some amount of thoughts on Polwater as well, or at least that experience. And they probably are dealing or aware of the corruption. They might have fought creatures that are corrupted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is one of them Toroff corrupted?
And has been hiding it. That's interesting.
So, if not to say we have to, but let's say we did use those two art pieces. Both of them are behind masks. One of them had like a knight's armor, and the other one has like a multifaceted mask. Maybe they're
That's
fully...
interesting. There's something you could do there. And also that could also be an adventure hook, right? It turns out that so-and-so, one of them is corrupted. Like, oh, okay. So it doesn't have to be a world detail that's, set in stone, but that's something the DM can totally grab that.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like if they are, they are masters and they're training people, but they're also Obojimans, and they're also dealing with this unprecedented thing that's happening to their island. So they are not just going to be like, well, we're just going to keep our school open and let this thing. They're going to be like actively doing it, and it's more like, you're in the school, but you're also just working with us to stop this thing. Like we're not just like sitting around, like going through our lesson plan during the day. They're going to be like, this is sort of like learning on the job. Like you're now a part of our movement, or our like what would they be doing if they weren't teaching in the school? Like,
I almost imagine they're like first responders, like regional first responders to like threats coming out of the wetlands. And so I can imagine like you go to the school, you're like, great, I'm going to start my time here. I'm going to learn this. And like the first morning that you're there, then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we have to go to Polwater to help evacuate people. Now you're dealing with this like kind of thing. But what brought you there was because you're in the sword school, but the sword school is very active in the region. Yeah. And so you can do things like that.
Yeah, you might, you mean most of those students might spend a majority of their time just camping, like throughout the Blackwater wetlands.
Going from place to place, like, Toroff might be leading a part of, the school and being like, all right, we're going to go clean this place up. Or this village now is the corruption's encroaching and we're going to build bulwarks, just like dig bulwarks all around.
It does make them more noble than I think based off of what you were saying earlier. I was previously expecting them to be more, selfish in their teachings and their styles. Like they might say we're the first line, but in reality, like how true is that? But in this version, it definitely seems like they're actively combating dangers.
I mean, that's also a great way to show the nuance of each of their philosophies, right? Like one of them might be much more inclined to do that, and the other one might be like, okay, I hunt monsters. The other one's like, we're gonna go help people no matter what, like that kind of thing. So I mean,
if one of them is a ranger and the other one's not, then like the ranger might be actively, who's seen the corruption, might be actively facing it, compared to Boulder, who might not be. It's just like,
I mean, you could divide it up as like the ranger is the monster hunter. They're dealing with all the monster activity, and like if Toroff's the monster hunter ranger, then Boulder is sort of the fighter, who is like, just helping people and going around and just making sure that like, the haulers don't predate on vulnerable villagers that are dealing with how to, running away from the corruption. Or Boulder might be leading trains of refugees to get from one place in the east to a safer, village on the west.
What's cool about that is that means like as a character or as a player, I could choose kind of, I want to go, the more rangery monster hunter path. And now my adventures are about that.
Yeah. And
people who don't want to do that, probably players who aren't so interested in like the combat element of it are going to go and help people dealing with this corruption. Like that's awesome.
I think no matter what, it's interesting to have these characters be unpleasant. I think part of Blackwater Wetlands would make a character fairly unpleasant at least in the way that they live. And especially I like the idea of them accomplishing good things and doing good things. But then at the exact same time, you're like, oh, but I don't like you though. Like you are doing a good thing and I'm here to help you. But you're like, I kind of, I'm not going to say this person's name, but I doubt he's ever watching this. But my high school art teacher was an interesting person. He's a good guy. Looking back on it, I was just a dirtbag. But very, very interesting dude and very, well, not kind. Very interesting guy, I guess is the best way to say it. Point is, like, he had this quality where, like, you're so talented. You're one of the most talented artists I've ever seen. And you're so interesting. He was also the football coach. But at the exact same time, he would treat you while in cart class like you are one of his football students. So I was, Crofton! So I had to walk in, Crofton, sit down, get your pencils out. What is this? This face is all messed up. This is the wrong, like, what are you doing? Like, he'd always, so he'd treat you like it was like you were in the military, but in like an artistic art class. It was so strange. So like, there's like this love-hate relationship and you're like, just give me a break, dude. I'm taking this class because it's an art class and I'm trying to get an easy A. Art's interpretation. I could suck and you'd still have to give me something, right? He would not. I failed art class 3 times. But I took it every year. I took beginning art class every year and he hated me. He hated me for it.
Well, it's probably love-hate though. He probably remembers you to this day. He's probably like, oh, that guy, like, I just wanted him to do this thing and he wouldn't do it. But
the point is there's like, it's like there was this relationship that was like, you're kind of a jerk. But at the same time, you're like, but you're doing, like, you're not that bad and you're doing good stuff and you're teaching me cool stuff and I admire the things that you're doing. But stop yelling at me. So I kind of feel like
it's the delivery, right?
The relationship could be similar where it's like
Pai Mei from Kill Bill.
Oh, yeah.
That it's just that, like, the disrespect for the western side of the island, but the fact that they're also protecting the western side of the island, it gives just like an interesting relationship.
I mean, there could be like a slight bit of resentment there. Like, they're doing the hard work and, like western, like if ever somebody from the western side of the island, deigns to trickle over the Gale fields and winds up in the Bracken wetlands and they're like, ooh, it's wet and there's mosquitoes. Like, and there's Toroff and Boulder, like dealing with corruption and people fleeing and
monsters,
and people falling over and dying of corruption and somebody's like, it's too cold, where's my cocoa, like, and they're just like, oh, like,
maybe a way to play that is that they have very little patience. Like they're
like New Yorkers, it's just like New Yorkers don't want to hear a bunch of nonsense. They just like when, where, how, who, what,
Got it. We're from the West Coast, so it's just our relationship with people from New York.
That's right. Obojima is like the United States. I mean, yeah, the further east you go, the more like the less tolerance they have for your nonsense. Did we just realize something in this podcast? Oh my gosh. I remember going on a trip to New York, and I was a high school kid, and man, it was a culture shock, and it was just like still in the United States, and just like I realized the level of lack of tolerance of nonsense. And they're just like, I try to talk to a New Yorker and so like, oh, no, what? I'm going to go around and tell you this long story to get to the point. And they're just like, oh, just tell me the thing.
Shut up and say it.
Just shut up and say it. Yeah. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from being in New York. It's great. It's refreshing. It is so refreshing for somebody to just go, I just want this now. And you're just like, oh, okay. And as long I was like, oh, that ruffled my feathers the way you said that so directly. It's like, no, they're just telling you what they want. It's like, okay, I got it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So the Blackwater wetlands are an analog for New York.
A New York taxi driver would be like Toroff.
Okay, so they're new, but both of them are new. We're taking a spin. They're both New York taxi drivers.
Yeah. Yeah, like ordering at a restaurant in New York.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you do not, like my experience at least is if you don't come knowing what the heck you want when the waiter's there, or you're at the pastrami stand and you're like, and they come up and they go, what'd you want? And you're like, no, look at they're just like, oh,
they punch you right in
the
face.
It is. That's when you get hit in the head and you lose your,
your disadvantage on your next pastrami check.
Your next menu selection.
Okay. We've extended beyond our time for Toroff and Boulder. Toroff and Boulder. Let's jump onto the next one, which is something Lom and Salt, also something in scale.
Telu and Scale.
Telu and Scale, which I believe Telu and Scale is the other one that has a feat.
So Telu and Scale are also in the Gift of Hiratashi.
Yep.
And they're in the northern, kind of northwestern corner of the gift.
Yep.
Yeah, they have feet, and then Lom and Salt, they do something else. Should we save that for the end?
Yeah, we'll save that for the end. So Telu and Scale's master cut / strike. So they have a versatile technique. Where based off of how you are holding your versatile weapon, so now we're getting into specific weapons here. So not all weapons apply here. Versatile weapons apply here. While wielding a versatile weapon in one hand, your quick movements and agile defense allow you to regain ground even when your enemy advances once before the start of your next turn. When you're hit with a melee attack from a creature within reach, the creature takes damage equal to twice your proficiency bonus. So this is an automatic damage. So this is like a, if you could imagine like a duelist with one sword out, and they go in to make a strike against you, and you kind of like do this quick reply that like slashes the side of their shoulder. I'm thinking Zorro.
Yeah.
Or if you're, Princess Bride between the two swordsmen at the top of the cliff, and they're going back and forth, and there's a lot of this like da 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 da. But imagine like, when someone comes in, you block and go back and get something in, right? Like you're always making ground in this regard, which is really cool. And then the last one is two-handed. So you switch. When wielding a versatile weapon in two hands, your powerful stance allows you to catch your target off guard. Whenever an enemy is within range, makes a weapon attack against you and misses, you can use your reaction to attempt to knock the attacker off balance. The target must succeed a dexterity saving throw or be knocked prone.
Wow.
And so reaction, knocking creatures prone when they fail to hit you. So you're using the fact that they've missed you to now push them off balance onto the ground.
So this is like really slick sword fighting.
Yeah, slick sword fighting, but with versatile weapons. So you think of it less as like a rapier doing this, and think of it more as like switching from a sword. I guess this is interesting. This is kind of like a lightsaber. I know lightsabers mean nothing, but you'll see them like kind of like do the like, I'm sabering now, and now I'm not sabering. I'm using a dual-handed thing.
Is there a reason, just story-wise, I'm trying to like picture in my head that if I just had a two-handed weapon, why I couldn't do the back half of that, and if I had like a light weapon or a one-handed weapon, why I couldn't do the front half of that feat?
You could. I think it takes away from, I think the mechanically wise.
Yeah.
I built this feat outside of this, and we applied this feat in here. And when I made this feat, it was called the Versatile Sword, or Versatile Weapon Master.
That's right.
And the concept behind it is versatile weapons are almost always used in one way. And that is, I pick the weapon. I want one hand or I want it two hands, and they never switch. And so with this, you are given this opportunity to gain benefits by swapping and changing things. So, I'm actively choosing to shift in and out of my form in combat to gain benefits. And so it just makes, I think maybe D&D was expecting you to I don't know, well, you guys were there. We're expecting versatility to be more potentially useful and being able to swap in and out of it, but it's never used that way. You might as well just have two swords. You might as well have a one-handed sword. You might as well have a bastard sword and then a long sword. Long sword's two-handed, bastard sword's one-handed. There's never a reason that people tend to switch between both.
Unless you're Darth Maul.
And so with that, this is an attempt on our part to get you to utilize the versatile feature, which is otherwise not useful. And so you are gaining benefits from swapping into a dual-handed stance to a negative stance by making it so you could have a dagger or a big thing. It takes away what this feat was attempting to do, which is giving an extra layer to versatility.
So there's nothing, I guess what I'm wondering is, if I have a versatile weapon and I take this feat, it actually then allows me to do both. But let's say I only have a one-handed weapon and I know this feat. Can I not do the thing? This is more of a mechanical question. I'm just trying to understand the feat.
I mean,
itself.
as it's currently written, mechanically, you'd have to have a versatile weapon that you're swapping back and forth with.
Okay.
As a DM, if the DM wanted to allow you to not do that, you could. But I think it might be tricky. It might be interesting.
That could be part of if you're training with Lom and Salt, you're aware that this is going to be the outcome. You're going to get this feat. And so, at the end of it, you could be presented with okay, if I was DMing, I would tell my player, okay, you're going to get a versatile, you're playing with versatile weapons. You're going to have these kinds of feats. Name what's your cool weapon at the end of it, because they're going to make that weapon for you. And then when you are the master and you've defeated one of them in combat to the first touch, they come out and they bestow this weapon upon you. It's a versatile weapon. It's super cool. And then that's now your cool weapon, that way you automatically have that weapon that does a versatile thing. You might have your two-handed sword, or you could use it one-handed or two-handed or whatever. But, it could be a part of the story where it's all right, you're going to, part of your apprenticeship to get to mastery is you're also building your lightsaber, as it is.
So that is the next school does that though.
Oh,
right.
Well,
yeah.
then.
So probably not that.
Probably not that then.
But I think with it just comes down to you shouldn't just be going to these schools blanketly. I'm going to go to all the schools and train. Go to the schools that apply to the type of character you want to play.
Yeah.
So if you're a rogue with a scimitar, this might not be the school for you. And that's okay. I realistically, to get all of these, you'd have to be 12th level and not take a single. You'd have to be 12th level. You'd have to be the alternate version of a human or your own custom lineage. And then you'd have to be 12th level and never take a ASI to get all of these. So it's it's a pretty specific style to get every single one of these things.
Here's the point I was trying to make earlier is if I have, let's say I use a rapier.
Yeah.
And you were talking about Princess Bride and stuff like that. And it got me really thinking, I want to be able to use that half of the feat,
Sure.
So that's all. I was wondering if if I have this feat, I don't know how it's worded. I have to read it again, but if, I know we're talking about feats now. We're supposed to be talking about the schools, but we can talk about this offline.
Sure.
Anyway. Yeah. I won't dig into that. We have schools to talk about.
Open that can of worms.
I think when it comes down to it is we can reduce the feat and make it so it's open to all of those things, but it is going to get rid of the feat's purpose initially. Like, it's going to reduce the like intention behind the feat.
Versatile weapons.
And then in addition to that, this feat is already incredibly long as far as like what you can actually do with it. There's like it's like 2.5 paragraphs. And there's a lot of extra things that were added in there where you have to, it gets mechanically interesting. So adding more to it, we could, or you could just DM could pick on the fly. You know, like DM was like, yeah, you can use it. It's a feat.
Yeah.
It's already an accessory rule that the DM's choosing, allowing you to use anyway. So, but we need to talk more about the actual location, because we are now well beyond
the halfway
we are
point.
now way behind on this.
All right, so who are these
So
these
Telu and
characters?
Scale, on the last episode we discussed like
Nakadama?
the idea of them being Nakudama. Now both of them being Nakudama is kind of interesting if we wanted to.
Because we were saying scale was an interesting word, like
Scale
name
is-
for a Nakadama.
Scale is an interesting word.
Since they are smooth.
Or one of them could be Nakudama and the other one doesn't have to be. I think both are good. This one does apply well to the combination of one master being one thing and the other one being another, right? Like versatility in sword play or weapon use, one of them being very one-handed, the other one being dual, similar to how Kanan and Moon is defensive and offensive.
I mean, one of them could even be just have one arm. They could have one of their arms
That's
got
cool.
bitten off by a monster or something like that. And it's like now they've developed, because they only have one arm, they've developed this one-handed style that's brilliant, you know?
Yeah, I like
And
that.
They're like, yeah. So
That's really cool. Is that Telu or Scale? And is that the Nakudama? Is it a one-handed Nakudama? I actually think the one-handed person should be human rather than Nakudama. Because
it makes me think of Scale. Like I was thinking of like they were out fishing and there was like, you know, either some fish folk named, you know, Scale or something like that, or this great sea monster called Scale, and that's the thing that took his arm or her arm.
Yeah.
And
But they defeated it at the same time.
Eventually defeated it, and it could be up in the school. Like,
Does that mean this person used to be a member of the Divers Lodge? Coastal Divers
like
Lodge?
that. Yep.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yep. And they could still be connected to it. They could still like be, you know, friends of Paloma or something like, or Captain Clintock, depending on their age.
The
you know?
age, yeah.
I mean, that's cool because like it's also located on the shore.
On the
Like,
shore, yeah.
So about the school is we can do something neat like that. So yeah, they're already kind of associated with the sea. You could do some of the challenges that they might have for you is like doing feats of you know, swimming or diving and stuff like that could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I know I've read, you know, about people who had encounters with great white sharks, you know, like, and they've been attacked by them. And some of them come away like from it, like, saying like that it was the kind of a peak experience of their life. And they kind of have this new relation, and a good portion of them aren't angry at the shark. They're just like, wow, like this was this amazing predator and I was in its domain. And they kind of have this like sort of weird connection to it. And I mean, this could be kind of Scale's experience where, you know, Scale's like, you know, this was the greatest adversary I ever encountered, you know, and like it took a part of me and then I took a part of it, and now we're kind of bonded in this weird way, which is why I took its name. And, you know, there could be kind of this background to it that's pretty, you know, interesting as far as like their relationship with monsters. And, you know, like,
Is Scale the monster version, not the person?
yeah,
Formerly a different person, now now known as Scale. But no, is the monster a beast, a monstrosity, or is it a spirit? Not to say it needs to be a spirit, but we do kind of talk about elder spirits being disconnected from, you know, like the standard understanding of humans in a sense.
depends if you just kill a beast, then there's that kind of relationship to it. If scale was an elder spirit, there could be a really deep sort of weird connection here where the elder spirit could now inhabit scale to some degree. Like it's like this, like, I don't know, like, there was this, it's kind of like what we're saying about the elder spirit in Opal Falls, that the elder spirit every now and then has to sacrifice itself to kind of maintain this like circle of life in Obojima. So that elder spirit would fly up into the air and the hunter would come get it. And then that would like restart the great cycle again. This could be another thing where an elder spirit every now and then chose someone to battle it to the death. And it just happened that Scale was now the one to do it. And in that fight,
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
It's like, you never know what's going to happen. So yeah. So Scale wound up winning. And in part of that, Scale was like, well, now you get, I don't know, some kind of power, or you just take the name. It doesn't even need to be a transference of power or a partial possession or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And what's cool about it is now, like we were talking about with what are the names? The Toroff and Boulder.
Or as I say, Boroff and Tolder.
We built this whole theme around, that they're dealing with the stuff in the wetlands and even possibly the corruption and all this kind of stuff. If you have this whole thing with Telu and Scale, where Scale had dealt with this elder spirit, I wonder if there's something is there an encounter that Telu had with a spirit, and there's a philosophy of the way that they approach sword fighting that is, draws inspiration from spirits in a certain way. Or do we want to keep that as like that Scale's thing? Now, what does Telu have to offer? Where does Telu come from?
There is something with Scale being one-handed, missing a arm, and kind of having something taken, but then getting something back. Really reflects on the taking damage but giving something back in that one-handed ability in the feat. Where you get hurt, but in return are able to respond, which is super cool.
It's also very corruption too, because the corruption has that same theme of it takes from you, but it also gives something to you. So it's like maybe there's an Obojima theme starting to merge here where it's all about to give and take. But
that's cool. I like it. I don't know if it could be that's very singular to Scale and Telu has a different feeling. I do like the idea that the dual-handed big weapon wielder is the Nakudama, who's
I'm a fan.
Yeah, that's great.
Who's tiny and doing all this stuff. I think that's really fun. Because Telu seems to be very swift and like probably agile. And then Scale is pretty swift and agile. Telu's like on the ground, like, so this is how you check him with your shoulder to get him on the ground. This is how you use the blunt of the weapon to knock him prone. That's really funny. Yeah, it's definitely a bit different. I like because there's a spell that forms sand walls, which Tidewater created to generate their town. I like the idea of one of them, maybe Telu or maybe Scale, will go and make a bunch of sand walls out in the beaches, and then Telu is like, okay, you got to charge through all of them. And he's having the kids like, how many can you get through?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll show you. And he gets through 12 of them. And then it's like, all right, now you go. And like all of these students are like failing to get through one or two.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's fun.
Like big sand dummies out there.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I like that. I mean, with Telu being more it sounds like maybe a little beefier, a little like stronger. I don't think he's at all. I think he's like maybe the anti-version of Boulder and the other one,
Toroff. Yeah.
I'm imagining a Nakudama that's like wider than they are tall.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like a fire plug.
Yeah. But they're very like, maybe jolly, like they're big and strong, but they're a little more like, helpful and maybe laugh at themselves quite a bit.
Telu could be even just like to give a sense, like they might be like their background might be like they were a mariner, right? So they have this like love for the sea and like the salt wind on their face, and just like And it's like finding that joy in life, which is what Nakadama often kind of look for.
Yeah.
And so the idea of, you can almost imagine a very kind of, it's a little bit different, but like the boisterous, like, warrior about like, this is a test of who you are, and kind of like, the fight is how you prove your worth. And, but like there's this joy in it. Like the clang of steel is the thing that like will stir the blood, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's fun.
Maybe their relationship to the sea and the not Courier Brigade, but the Divers Lodge has a lot of divers come through and just train with him a little bit.
Yeah. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Like this is a character. I think they could. I think it'd be really memorable and just like. I just lost my train of thought. It probably wasn't that great. Moving on.
A little bubble back.
I was thinking for their like location to be directly on the sand, like directly on the beach, and it could almost be like whatever scale was, whatever that big creature was, is like carved out of sand, and like its mouth is open. And that's how you enter into their domain, which is kind of like pseudo underground.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's kind of like dug out into the sands, and like, it's all like hardened sand. And you walk around it, and there's like a little. And I also, for some reason in my head, imagining this to be much smaller than the other schools. Like the two of them have like 10 students at max or something, and it's a really small facility. And
that's cool.
A lot of people come and train, but never gain the feat mastery or anything like that. And
it could be the newest school as well.
Yep.
Like, so does that mean that they branched off from another one? Was there a schism in another school? And so they were like, no, we're going to go form our own.
I don't know. Maybe it could be that they were like both on the same crew in the Divers Lodge. And they're like, Scale's like, I'm done fishing. I've only got one arm. This is a heck of a lot harder now. And they're like, well, let's just take a break. And then they just form a school. Maybe they they're friends, they're buddies. I like them being really close, compared to everyone else, which kind of seems like there's an odd like them being like best friends or something like that. And when they train, I also think it's cool when they train, in other schools. You might imagine Moon teaches their own class and Caden teaches they're like, no, we're all together. Everyone get together, especially because their moves are supposed to be meant. They're, people are swapping in between the two of them. They're like harmonious. They work together with each other.
Yeah, it's like it makes me think of like there's a Nakadama sort of. I mean, is Telu a belly brewer?
Oh, interesting.
Possibly. Like it's kind of like a wrestler, kind of like bash into you, and it's. Like Telu could have started off as a belly brewer and then realized and developed their own sort of style off of that. Like it's an extension. Like if you were a belly brewer and then you're like, okay, I'm actually going to go to learn at Telu, like that school, and then add these things onto that, those abilities. Like it's like to round out your sort of wrestler brawler type.
That's fun.
It'd be cool.
I like that.
And it's sort of Nakadama based,
Okay, not to jump away from Telu and Scale, but we have 10 minutes left.
The puck of time.
The puck of time is spoken. We have to discuss
Lom and Salt,
which are the mountain dwelling sword skull.
Now this is the one that you're forging your own.
Yeah. So we were discussing, and I don't know exactly where this is going to be. Probably not too far away from Toggle. Maybe not connected directly, but close to it.
Lom and Salt is located on the northern slope of Mount Arbora, close to the summit.
Whoa.
Oh, so very far away from Toggle.
But that's simply what it says. Yeah. And we can change that.
We can. We are writing the book. You're not wrong.
We can change this world.
No, I don't hate them. Like maybe you have to go through Toggle to get like the road to them is through Toggle. But yeah, that is very interesting. They're up in the mountain. And so their whole thing is like, they are weapon masters.
Yeah.
But they teach you disciplines about the weapon through the forging of it and the creation of it. And then at the end, you would produce yourself a weapon of your own after learning with the masters to forge it.
And you yourself are a weapon.
Exactly.
Yeah. You forged yourself into a weapon.
I think potentially it could be that there is a mutual respect amongst the other 3 sets of masters for Lom and Salt, where it's like all of our weapons are from them. Like we all we all go to this sword school. We all participate. Yeah. Maybe this is even the oldest of them all, where it's like you go to Lom and Salt.
To have a salt sword.
A salt sword, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And you practice with them and you learn about your weapon before you can wield it.
I wonder if Lom and Salt, because in Toggle we have the Dara Forge Masters that do the folding with the glyph, and it's like if you've got a 22 glyph sword.
Yeah.
Like they folded it, put a glyph, folded it, put another glyph, folded it, put another. So the sword is like magically. So we could either smush those 2 together, where we could just make Lom and Salt those Forge Masters as well, and they have a shop in Toggle, but then they also forge up in there, or we could make these Lom and Salt their own sort of forgers and have the Dara forgers down there.
And the school could be anywhere. I mean, I know initially we liked the idea of it being on Mount Arbora to make it a different like journey to get there.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to make those Forge Masters the same characters, like I'd be like, yep, that also makes sense. And then what you could do is that their sword school could be in one of the caves, that are there, or something like that.
An abandoned mine or.
So I feel like I really like the mountainous side, because it's one of the few times that one of our locations is actively telling you to go into a snowy terrain. Right? Because at the top of a mountain, near the peak of a mountain, is going to be snowy. So this is their chance to experience something unlike other things. So I want to try to keep it up there. That being said, I forgot about the Forge Masters in Toggle, because that is so interesting, and their system's really cool. I think the issue with them, though, is it takes away the self-forging that you might produce, where it's like they're teaching you, because then it is fully required for them to be putting the glyphs in themselves. Like it takes away the like you're doing this and I'm doing this for you.
That makes sense.
Yep.
So for those forgers, like the people that the Forge Masters down in Toggle, is their whole thing that they only make weapons, or is it that they make ingots that are forged this way?
Right now they make weapons, but they also make all kinds of stuff. Like they made that golem, and they forged glyphs into this golem steel, and it apparently the golem gained some kind of sentience and just walked off one day, and it's out there roaming around, and people are like, and that was one of the things that we're saying, like Holly, when she's trying to rebuild the Pontui, like she's trying to like encase it in metal that can be resist the corruption and all that, and the golem might be one of the keys to this. But the idea of that these Dara were the ones, they could forge things, they only forge things that they're really interested in. So we could say that they're just like, they make armor and they make ingots and they make other stuff, but we could save the weapon stuff.
Yeah, we might remove the weapon forming completely from them and just say like they make magical trinkets and objects through their forging technique.
Maybe they actively don't make weapons. Are they pacifists? They refuse to make
that's
weapons.
That's kind of cool.
They won't do it.
And that's also interesting too, because then it's like, can you get ingots from them and bring it up to Lom and Salt? Yeah. What will that do? How do Lom and Salt react to that?
And because I think there's just something cool about saying you've got a 20 glyph sword or 100 glyph sword.
Absolutely.
That's super awesome. But I think making the pacifist is really cool. And I think that you've got to get an ingot that has been folded 100 times. And then from that ingot, you can take it to Lom and Salt and make a sweet sword.
You're right. It is hard. I don't know. Should we just make them the masters and put them up at the mountainside? And it's like, but then you have to go all the way up to the top of the mountain to get them for Holly, like to get metal, like and getting metal up there and all that thing is just a.
I think we could do it. I think we could do it as we're describing it now.
Yeah, they're pacifists. They make ingots. You if you want, Lom and Salt will say you've got to go to Toggle. You got to find the Dara Swords Masters. I forget what I've called them, but you can get those ingots, bring them back up, and then you'll forge your weapon.
So with Lom and Salt, then they're up in this mountainside. You know, there's this respect from the other sword schools. They're producing weapons for you. You have to come and train with them. What does that look like? What does training with them look like? Obviously, it's not like we're calling it a sword school or we're calling it one of these sword schools. So there has to be actual weapon training in some capacity. But like it has to, I almost feel like it's almost just labor intensive. Like, you know, it's almost like, again, you're thinking of, you're not thinking, I'm thinking of Karate Kid, right? Where it's
I'm
like,
thinking of Karate
there's
Kid now.
this kind of like, you know, oh, you're going to do this thing that has no correlation with what you think it's going to do. And then, you know, in a very weird, like painting the fence now makes you an expert defensor, you know, like with all these defensive skills, you could do the same thing where it's like, you know, holding buckets of ore out doesn't feel like it's doing anything for you. But then the moment that you go to like keep your sword extended at the longest time, you have this stamina that was only built in from these like very hyper specific training techniques that
You're
they
at
require.
altitude. Yeah.
But, okay, so they don't have a feat associated with that though.
No.
So that's like if their training doesn't lead to like a new skill. I mean, obviously you're forging a weapon, you're getting a thing, but that goes to like maybe like a point you had earlier about like, okay, you're doing these things. Do you forge a weapon and get, you know, like your strength goes up, you know, something like that. Like that's the tough part, because if their training doesn't pay off the way that the other schools do, but you're learning to forge a weapon, the reward is the weapon.
Right. Yeah. There's like, you know, there is.
Are you dueling at this one? Like, do you duel the masters in this one?
I think that's the thing, is like we are building it into the sword schools. So it either needs to apply the same rules that the other sword schools have, or we shouldn't call it a sword school.
Yeah. Yeah.
In which case it just feels like it's a different location.
Yeah.
But I think having it be a sword school, I think you can mix the two things together and still have it be interesting. You know, like
that does make sense. Like you've got to, I mean, in order for it to be the sword school, you've got to learn something. You know, having the masters say something to the effect of like, you're not getting a weapon. I'm not giving you a sword until you can prove to me that you're worthy of having the sword. Like, touch me. If you can't touch me, I'm not getting. You're not getting a sword here.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, like that is interesting. That's an interesting story. It definitely is like, you know, it's a different experience in these other places.
I mean, if we did do a feat for this, what would it be? You're on the mountainside. It's in snow. You know, what kind of things are you fighting here? Or
well, like, we could do a feat. The reason I didn't want to do a feat is I really like the idea of you getting a sword, like to train with these other things, or getting a weapon. I think that's really interesting.
Or does the sword act like a feat? Like, is it a magic sword? I mean, obviously the Dara have burned glyphs into it, so it's going to have some magical quality to it.
I think, you know, I think we mentioned that it was like a +1 sword or something like that. But we also don't want to, like, you know, blanket.
It's not like Stormbringer or something.
Yeah, we don't want to blanket produce like flame tongues and stuff like that.
It doesn't have to even be +1. Like, I'm imagining, like, what if it was a sword that was, this might not be cool enough to forge, but like, it's a sword that is magical. So like things that can't be hit by
demons,
like demons can. It's your sword.
Sure,
it is just a magical sword.
I think
that's cool. Like demon slayers. Yeah.
What we were trying to do with it too is like produce a blade that's like not produce a magic item that they care about and is worthy of having. Yeah, like a story connected to the sword that you generated and produced, rather than like, I found this thing after I killed a troll.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tolkien.
It's only meaningful, and it's only meaningful until I find a +2 sword.
Yeah, exactly. And then I throw it away.
I toss it. Yeah.
So like this sword is meant to be something that you keep and care about. And especially because if you look at the magic items in Obojima, which of course you haven't because they're not released yet, we are not skewing weapons. Like they are not producing flame tongue daggers because that's not a use to them.
There are also magic weapons aplenty.
Yeah.
Like that's the D&D ecosystem.
That's just not what Obojimans or Obojimans care about. So to have this +1 sword is like the magical weapon Like
That's right.
having one of these things is important and should be important. And I think that's a really fun story to tell. And giving a feat, there's 3 feats already. I think this is a unique way to access this. I think it just comes with, training and a different, and just to earn the sword in the same way that you'd earn the feat.
So if I'm going to Voltron all the sword schools, then this better be a versatile weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think, with it, it's interesting to go up there and maybe you don't even see the forge. Like you go up there and train with the 2 of them. And like, there's still all of this, individual training that you do. And it's just like the other schools, and they have you deal with, troubles or go and like stand in the snow for a week straight and don't move. Like there's all this crazy stuff that they do. And the moment you touch them, then they reveal the forge. They're like, now you can
go into the sanctum.
Now you can go to the sanctum. They go in there and there's like, here are all of the metals available on the island. And there's like 50 of them. And they're like, you pick the one that sings to you.
So really like the weapon creation part of it has to be the robust part, like the part that's like the feat, it's like you're basically building your lightsaber and you get to kind of kit it out the way you want it to be.
Yeah, so that process has to be really fun.
Yeah.
Is there like something where the forge is like, what if the forge is like sort of like cold fire or something magical and kind of like it's coming from Mount Arbora, like
it's ran off of
spirit fire or something.
Something. There's a rare ingredient called something's frozen breath.
Oh,
and it is an ancient dragon's breath that is frozen and shattered.
Sweet.
And maybe there's a huge collection, and it's all cold steel forge, like cold hammering and things like that. In the scent, like just pressed steel from the heat is generated from, salts.
It's like you can get a burn from cold.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cold that it flips all the way around and it becomes, it
becomes hot again.
Yeah, hot again. It's like it melts
the temperature
steel.
of the sun.
Yeah. It's just like this weird.
Are you confused? We are.
Yeah. It's magic. Fantasy.
I like that though. I think that's cool. Like it's a cold steel.
Yeah.
The forge is run by Nakudama. That's something's frozen breath.
What was that called?
I don't know. I was just looking at it too.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Nakamai? Nakamai's frozen breath?
Yeah, there it is. Nakamai's frozen breath. That's cool though. So then the it's not, the system up there is not about like, oh, you're all forging and you're collecting slag and you're doing all this stuff. It's like you are training as if you were in a school, just like you would these other places. And the moment that you have gained mastery, you've touched the master, you won the duel, then you're taken and almost ceremoniously into the sanctum. Like maybe there's like it's almost like a graduation ceremony. Like everyone like, hugs you and you go in, you do this thing and you're gone for like a week. You're in the sanctum, you're in the forge for a week straight, and then you come back out with your weapon.
Maybe like one of the things to get this weapon, like, cause I'm thinking of what swords mythically represent. Like they represent, justice. They represent like separating truth from lies. They represent
authority,
a symbol of authority.
Yeah.
They represent the potential to, they also represent like self-restraint, like, to keep your sword in your scabbard. It's like, that's the self-restraint. You're not like throwing out and dealing death, but you're like have this death dealing object, but you're not, attacking people with it. So
it's also a mark of a person's ability to make a change on the world. It's like, I don't know. I've shared this story with you. I don't know if I've shared it with you before. I'm gonna now because it's one of my favorites. But there's an account. This is a historical account of an Arabian traveler. This is in the Middle Ages, who got to witness a Viking birth ceremony. There was a new child. It was a son. And the father says something to the effect of, I bequeath, talking to his newborn son, I bequeath you nothing but this sword so that you can make your way in the world. Like, that's it. And I just always thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And so the idea of it is this mark, like a sword also means that this is your ability to change the world around you. Obviously, it's a very violent concept.
Well, I mean, it's like the potential to like, you can walk into, it's like, the classic Western where you walk in and he's got the 6 guns on, but he's not going to draw them. And everybody's like, oh, this guy could kill everybody in the bar. But, but it's like maybe part of this whole journey is that you go up there, you train with them, but then you have to go down into Obojima and do some act of that lets them know that now they can forge this kind of a weapon. Like now you've earned the right to get this kind of a crazy weapon, that represents something. Because if you go get that thing and you walk back into Obojima and you're like, I'm drawing a thing that was, forged by the ancient ice dragon's magical breath on Mount Arbora. They're just going to be like, what the hell? Like, so you've got to be of a certain kind of quality to do that, because they're not just going to give it to anybody,
Yeah.
So somebody who's not going to abuse that power. So I think you would have to demonstrate, like go and help a village or go and do some kind of quest that shows that you're worthy to hold this object.
Is there an oath that you have to take when you forge this thing?
Oh, dude.
You know what I mean? Like that's something that is then imbued into it. Like,
yeah, that's cool.
It gets, there's a level of that turns it into like almost more religious, a religious experience in there, which is fine if we want to head in that direction. But
we could tippy-toe around it, like keep it secular, keep it.
It starts to feel more like Jedi. You're taking an oath. I feel like if the other 3 schools represent a facet or a branch of what swordplay could be and what a master could produce, this represents like the core of weapon fighting and the understanding of what a weapon truly is and the balance and the master of the basics. It's kind of like again, not to harken back to Avatar, but dang, that show's good. When Zuko and Aang go and learn firebending and they go back to meet the masters, which are 2 dragons, and they teach them how to firebend. And they're learning like the basics of firebending, but already after both experiencing firebending outside of that and learning it in different ways, and Zuko's redirecting lightning and all this other stuff, like all these other things, they've learned these other facets of firebending, and then they go back to harken their skills at the masters and learn the basics of it again. And this is almost the same thing. Like you'd come back after learning Kaden and Moons, and the masters, Lom and Salt are like, you can barely hold the weapon, like an apprentice student. Like, they're like, you have to go back through and learn like what it is to hold, like what this means, what the symbolism of this weapon actually is.
So what if it's not touching the master to get to this thing, it's actually holding the weapon. It's like Thor's hammer. It's like the weapon's there and you're trying to pick it up and it just, you're not able to wield it. And only when you're able to pick this thing up. It's like Excalibur from the stone kind of deal.
I was thinking about Conan the Barbarian with the riddle of steel.
Yeah. What is the riddle of steel?
What is the riddle of steel? Yeah.
That's cool.
There's something there.
And we will find out what that is. Not now, though, because we were like 20 minutes over episode. So not to cut you off, but we have to shut this episode.
We're on a good pace.
The puck of time is decreed.
The puck of time has been off for like an hour. Thank you so much for joining us on the Obojima Podcast. This episode was the equivalent of when you write a happy birthday sign to someone on a poster board. The first episode was like, big H, big A, and then now we're like P, like we're really getting small in the letters. So I'm sorry if this felt a bit abrupt and we rushed through these last 3 schools, but they will be better detailed in the book. We're very, very excited about them, very passionate, as you can tell. And so thank you so much for joining us. You can follow us on Discord, Instagram, other social medias. You can watch the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and VOD on YouTube. Thank you again, and we will catch you next week when we talk about some other random thing. Thank you again, and see ya.